If there's one thing I wish I'd known sooner about Excel Esports, it's that there's only really 3 kinds of scenario they can throw at you. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the 3 types of categories you most often see and how to think about tackling them to improve your position on that leaderboard. For the past 2 years, I've been absolutely obsessed with the Microsoft Excel World Championships. Excel Esports is ridiculously fun, very challenging, it's got a great community around it, and I'm so pleased to be a part of it. However, particularly if you're new to this kind of thing, it can be overwhelming and scary to see one of these cases, especially when you remember there's only 30 minutes to solve 160 questions and 5 bonus questions, and that some of the top people can even do this in half the time. Hopefully, with some of the meta knowledge I'm sharing here, you'll feel more confident to go ahead and tackle these yourselves. Last year was my first year taking part in the competition, where I came 8th in the open qualifier. I followed this up by going through the head-to-heads all the way to the final 32, where unfortunately I was knocked out. You just have to accept when it comes to Excel, shit happens. This year, I'm hoping to ride it out all the way to the grand finals in Las Vegas, where the top celebrities compete in front of a live audience. If you want to follow my journey, learn some things about competing yourself, or just pick up a few Excel tips, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really means a lot for me and for the channel. As I've taken part over the past few years, I've started to see some patterns in how the cases are presented. For the purposes of this kind of thinking, I'm ignoring the small subset of particularly difficult cases, which are mainly created by one man, but assuming you get lucky and you don't get Jarmaned, most cases fall into one of these 3 categories. Level 1 is the data-based scenarios, level 2 are the game-based scenarios, and level 3 are the map-based scenarios. I'll be listing a few cases that fall into each of these categories, and I'll pop links down below to the FMWC website where you can buy the cases I'm talking about to go and practice for yourself. And I know what you're thinking, isn't any Excel-based game always a data game? And yes, that is true, but there are some tips and techniques that are really useful for some of those more complicated scenarios that don't really fall into a typical data job. So what do these involve? Level 1 are those data-based scenarios. If you are a data analyst or a financial colleague and you use Excel regularly, you probably already have all the skills you need to tackle one of these types of cases. These are cases like sommelier, Speedlandia, and I'm left-handed, right? In these database cases, you're typically given some data to process, and you're given a series of questions to answer these. So this might be something like using text split to split out a list of data, perhaps you need to be summing up based on conditions, using count ifs, that sort of thing. Typically, the first level or 2 can be done with just XLOOKUP, although if you want to check out me solving entire cases using only XLOOKUP, I'll include a link down below. For example, sommelier was based mostly around reading data from 2 different tables. One was a customer table with a list of customers and their preferences for wines based on 5 different attributes, and the other was a wine table where the different wines were scored for each of those 5 same attributes. The questions range from being as simple as what was the sweetness preference for a given person, to which of the wines would a given person like best, given the combination of all of those different attributes. For the later questions, you had to fold in assigning categories based on upper and lower bounds, but again, this is something that comes up very often in actual database work, so if you use Excel regularly, it's likely you already have the tools you need to tackle these database cases. Level 2 are the game-based cases. The game-based cases build on the same skills you've seen in the database cases, but there are a few elements which separate them from the database cases in the way that I think about them. The game-based scenarios are some of my favourite ones to solve, and they're typically based around real-life games. Some examples of these are Oikre, which is based on the card game. Apologies if the pronunciation is totally off there. Collect Them All, which is based on Monopoly but with an Excel twist. Or Passing Notes, which is based on decoding coded messages. The game-based scenarios typically build on the same set of skills you practice for the data scenarios. However, there's a number of things that you often see in these game-based scenarios which just don't really pop up in those data-based ones. These include things like using coloured cells or symbols instead of plain data. For example, card-based games often include the suit symbols, and dice-based games often include the dice symbols to show how many pips are rolled. A good example of a case which bridges data and game-based scenarios is Elections Are Coming. Elections Are Coming is really a data-based case, but for some of the levels, the way the data is encoded is through the colours of the cells. As a side note, one common approach to changing colour-based data is to use Excel's find and replace using format as your search term. As a general rule, the game-based scenarios have more rules than the database scenarios, as there are additional things which can happen to affect the gameplay. You also might be expected to model 2 or more players playing simultaneously, which might affect other players' decisions further on. Finally, knowing a little bit of number theory can really help with these game-based scenarios. Primarily, I mean the modulus function, which in Excel is mod. Mod takes a number in a divisor and tells you what number is left over as a remainder. If this sounds a bit weird, you're used to it, you do it all the time when you read a clock, because 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the hour is actually 14, and you take 12 away from that because you've gone round and round and round and round the clock. This is useful for anything where you're going round and round. So for example, going around the board in Gotta Collect Them All, anything with a spinning aspect, whether that's a wheel or a slot machine, or like in Passing Notes where you were given a string and asked to offset each letter by a given amount of letters, because you'd often need to loop past Z back to A without going on to some other weird set of symbols. The third and most complicated type of scenario you're likely to experience are the map-based scenarios. The map-based scenarios can be really scary if you're new to this. Some great examples of map-based cases include Bear Island, Doggy Daycare, and deep sea diving. I should probably also include Feelucky the Gold Miner in this list, but I'm a little bit sore about that case as it is the one that knocked me out of the competition last year, just further cementing my hatred for Feelucky. Another example would be the recent case Treasure Hunt, which is a great first map-based case if you are new to this kind of thing. The reason it's a great case for getting used to map-based cases is that levels 3 to 7 don't reference the map at all. The map only really comes into play in levels 1, levels 2, and the bonuses, which make up more of the points than they normally do in these kinds of cases. Map-based cases need all the skills of the previous levels. You need to be confident manipulating data, using symbols, and even the turn-based style of approach. Map cases will have one or more maps on different tabs within the workbook, and the questions will involve finding a way around that map. You'll have to find a way of getting the data out of that map. It might be doing a two-way lookup using the map's rows and column names, or it might be turning the entire thing into a column so you've got a nice clear table to look up in. When it comes to Excel Esports, there are as many approaches as there are competitors, so just because you're not doing it the way someone on YouTube is, doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. The map might include symbols or colours or even both, which affect the kind of behaviours you have as you move around the map. There could be things on the map which might be objectives, or they might block you, or they could even come and get you if you come within range and eat you, like the bears do on Bear Island. You'll typically have some movement data, whether that's arrows or coordinates, and you'll have to use this to move around the map. One way to approach this, which Harry Gross taught to me, is using complex numbers, which as a mathematician I absolutely love, but there's all sorts of ways to approach this if that's something that just sounds weird and scary to you. The movement instructions might change as you move around the map, you might be picking things up as you go, you could be changing the map as you go, and you might even have to consider what happens if you go out of bounds, whether that allows you to loop back round, whether you stop completely, or whether you just keep moving in the direction you can keep moving in. All of these will be explained with the rules given with the case, but this means that the amount of variety in these kinds of cases can be absolutely massive. Map-based cases pose a really interesting challenge as they are often a lot easier to do visually than they are to do programmatically. This means that they can look deceptively simple, but when you try to crank out a solution in Excel, you're going to be slowed down and a little bit confused. So practicing a few different scenarios so you have approaches you're comfortable with will really help you get a leg up on the competition. While I have solved some data and game-based cases using only XLOOKUP in the past, I've never managed this with a map-based case. I'm planning to try using just XLOOKUP to solve Treasure Hunt soon, so I'll link to that video as soon as it's ready. If you've taken part or are thinking about taking part in the Excel World Championship, I'd love to hear if this video was helpful for you and what other kind of things you are struggling with the competition. For now though, thanks so much for watching. That's all from me, and until next time, keep excelling.